Bradford, what's going on today, brother?
Oh, hey, dude. Hey, dude.
Oh, man. So much going on.
You know what? What I love about our show is that sometimes we talk, we talk to a lot of people from our show, obviously.
We do. We have.
But we get to talk to people from other shows and other walks of entertainment industry. And we get to talk to somebody that we've never said a word to in our lives before. And that means anything could happen.
Ever. We've never talked to Paul Telfer before, but Paul is joining us from Days of Our Lives. And we've been going back and forth for weeks during this pandemic to get in touch with Paul. And finally, here we are.
Yes, he plays Xander on Days of Our Lives. Paul Telfer. Hey, buddy.
Paul, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for being so patient.
Yeah,
man.
No
hey,
problem.
in the entertainment industry, we learn patience, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I wish it was entertainment reasons why I haven't been able to do this yet, but we've been trying to buy a house in the middle of a pandemic, and it's really time-consuming and stressful, so that's been the main stuttering step that's been stopping me from actually doing this. Like,
did you find one?
Coming up, got to go and do this. We are in the process of countering an offer, countering to the owner today. So it's just, it's great. It's great. It's a perfect day to do it. It's a great distraction.
Sure.
Well, it's amazing how many people are doing that, like rethinking their home lives. And now, what was the impetus for you guys to change your home life?
Well, it was two things. It wasn't necessarily the same driving force that a lot of people have had, where it's like, okay, we're stuck in the middle of this pandemic. Let's get a bit more space for ourselves, make living at home a bit easier, all that. That had been the case for a while. My wife and I have been in this same apartment since before I started on Days. And a big reason I did Days was to save up money to buy a home. And finally, this was the year. Just got a new contract at Days, got the down payment, everything's looking peachy keen. Global pandemic. So just the way it goes sometimes. But yeah, so early on, obviously, it stopped us from being able to do anything at all because they shut it all down for a couple of months. And now you're dealing with the backlog of people that were trying to buy a house in the before times, plus the people that want to buy them now, plus the fact that there just aren't that many homes to buy. So it's just been a delight.
And showings are different now with COVID, and a lot of people don't want to even show their homes during this time.
Exactly.
But whatever, who cares? Paul, we're here to talk to you. Let me ask you this: you've been on Days, about 5 years now?
Yeah, it feels like now. I mean, not on contract the whole time. Like, I started on contracts and then went recurring and been back on contract. But yeah, I think it's been airing since 2015.
2015. Okay.
Wow. So that means you started shooting in 2013?
Yeah, right. With Days, because we shoot so far ahead. That's why I said that. I think I did actually start late 2014, and then my stuff didn't air until the following year. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. Have they caught up? Like, how far are you guys ahead now?
Well, that's the thing. So, like, we took 7 months off, right? And we were still 2 months ahead.
That's amazing.
And now we're back, and we're all slowed down because of the new COVID protocols, but we're still racing ahead. But we did have another little, 1 week shutdown that we did, but I don't think it's really affected our pipeline, if you know what I mean. So I think we're still a good 6 weeks, 2 months ahead, and that will only increase if we're if we.
Yeah, well, that's good. Listen, nobody knew then how valuable it would to be 6 months
have all
ahead.
those episodes in the bag. Yeah,
you were the only television show on TV that had new shows every day.
Yeah, that was. I mean, that's
huge.
What an
dude.
Unbelievable benefit to be able to not work for 7 months and not have to go into reruns like all the rest of us did.
Yeah, it was a big, I guess, a silver lining. It was funny because I kept thinking. You ever see that movie Demolition Man, the Stallone Wesley Snipes movie?
Yeah. Watch it. I watch it twice a week. I love it.
It's so good. But in that future, the only restaurants left are like Taco Bell. Because after the collapse, and I was like, what if we're the only TV show? This thing could go on forever. And this is just the warm-up pandemic. This is just the one that doesn't necessarily kill you. What happens when we get like a real killer disease, Ebola or whatever becomes airborne, like outbreak? Then Days of Our Lives will have a real chance to get back up in the ratings.
There you go. It's so funny. I had forgotten that about Demolition Man, that Taco Bell was the only one left. And that also makes the 3 shell mystery even more of a mystery.
You're going to need more than that if all you're eating is Taco Bell.
Right.
That's for sure. Amazing.
Industrial B-Day.
Yeah. Totally.
Okay,
Man.
it's funny. We watch a lot of House Hunters International, and every time a bidet, as you say so much more lovingly, a bidet, comes up, my kids are like, a butt washer, and I'm like, God, my kids are Americans, if nothing. I mean,
you're not gonna believe this, but I just had a birthday, and the present I got from our really good friends in Kentucky is a bidet. Is a bidet.
They sell those in Kentucky?
Well, I think she got it through some non-Kentucky website, but it came in a little brown box, fittingly, and it's got a very jokey, like a whole jokey vibe to it, which made me feel that maybe it was novelty, but it's a real bidet, so I just got to hook it up. But yeah,
awesome.
I'll send you follow-up pictures.
I feel like bidets now are more like robotic, like they have a lot of bells and whistles, if you will.
Well, it goes back to
wash all your bells and
Vegas.
whistles.
Yeah, exactly. Your nooks and crannies and your bells and whistles. It goes back to my first trip to Vegas, and we stayed at Aria, which was the plushest, fanciest hotel I'd ever been in at that time. And I don't gamble. We don't like gambling. Well, my wife kind of does, but I just don't really enjoy it. But I loved the hotel bidet. So I'd be on there with my book, with my legs numb. You know, they're like shouting, come to dinner. I'm like, I can't. And I'm fine. I'm having a blast, like, literally. So I think that's why.
That's amazing.
Years later, that's why I got it.
All right. All you need is a couple Taco Bells and book, and you're good.
Yeah,
you're good.
Great. Yeah.
So Paul, let's go back for a second to where are you from?
Well, I was born in Scotland. I'm Scottish, very Scottish. Both my parents are Scottish, and I lived there off and on. We moved around. My dad was a salesman, so we moved around a fair amount with his job. And I know Americans get a little bit. He was not a bidet salesman. He worked in textiles, in fabrics and various parts of that. But yeah, like we bounced up and down a lot, but we're still mostly based in Scotland. All my family were up there. And then I moved down to to England around, long story, just to make it simpler, around high school, and did all of my high school in England. And but still feel very much Scottish. But I'm kind of like classic British, I would say, because I was born in Scotland, spent a lot of time there, and my ultimate national identity is Scottish. But I spent formative years in England, have tons of English friends, and now family and everything else. So I just feel like a total Brit. So just a very generic British person.
Well, and did your Scottish, when you were younger, was your speech different? Did you have a thicker Scottish accent? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people still think, especially if I get drunk or I'm hanging out with my Scottish friends. I have a bunch of a little Scottish gang over here in LA now. And they're the same. They'll sound kind of what you would think normal or a bit more decipherable when they're talking to you. But as soon as they all get together, or we talk on the phone or whatever, or I talk to my family, and then I start rolling my R's, I start speaking really fast, and I get much more Scottish. And so it just creeps in. But yeah, so my dad has a really strong Scottish accent, but the vast majority of the time I hear him speaking, he speaks in this kind of robotic voice to make himself understood to English people. And so I think I have a kind of a slightly more sublimated version of that, where I spent so much time in America and so much time in England, where I just kind of smoothed it all out to a general, is he Australian? Is he from New Zealand? We're not quite sure. Well, so it's a conversation starter, which is nice.
Well, depending on your audition, I mean, no matter, like, if you feel like an Australian is going to be more hireable in the scenario, I mean, I'm curious.
Historically, they have been. So I tend to not disabuse people if they think I'm an Aussie.
I'm kind of curious about that. Do you like people from like the British, Scottish? Does that faction resent Australians as much as Americans do?
That's so dumb.
I mean, I don't know if it's like to what I like to think of it is because it's funny because so Americans, or at least they used to. I mean, before Love Island and things like that really lifted the skirt on what British people are actually like. I think a lot of Americans just assumed it was all Downton Abbey and horse and carriage and all that kind of thing, and everybody talking very properly. And that's not the case at all. So I mean, for me, I mean, it's been a long time since I've been accused of being Australian or South African or whatever. and it made me like feel bad. Do you know what I mean? Like I never like
right.
I don't have any like negative associations to those places. So if somebody wants to assume I'm one of the like, there's still people at Days of Our Lives that think I'm Australian and ask me about like Aussie rules football and stuff. And it's just too much effort in year 6 to be correcting them. So I'm like, yeah, sure. It's a great country.
I just meant stealing roles. I didn't like.
Well, on that side of it, I actually think the Aussies and the Brits are more similar than the Brits and the Americans in terms of like the pipeline to fame and the pipeline to like quality acting tends to still be through drama school. And you know, there's a couple of like elite drama schools in the UK. There's a bunch of elite ones in the UK. There's a few elite ones in Australia. And you know, from that you get a soap opera, and from that you might get some some theatre, and from that you might get an Aussie movie or whatever. And all I think that really happens with you know, the overhiring, if you want to call it, of Australians or British people, is that they tend to have already reached a certain level in their home country, so they're a bit more weathered and a bit more experienced than the equivalent fresh off the bus person from Arkansas or whoever, who might also be incredibly talented, but just haven't had an opportunity to operate professionally at the level an Aussie might have. But they still get to, but the Aussie gets to come over, or the Brit gets to come over and be brand new to the Americans, even though they have all this experience. But the difference is, the big difference between, I think, between the American perception of British people and the American perception of Australians is you all think Australians are like super rugged and macho and whatever, and you tend to think that specifically English people are all like Hugh Grant and very effete and very like in their emotions and staring out of windows and walking into rooms and walking back out again. You know, it's just all a bit more polite and civilized. Whereas like Aussies are basically like British rednecks that have been thrown over into this like they're brought up in like this like hellscape that's trying to murder them at all times, and so they are a bit tougher.
Yeah, I've seen Crocodile Dundee. I know exactly what Australia is about.
It's basically a documentary.
That's so funny, dude.
Well, so how did it happen for you? I mean, when you were growing up in your youth in Scotland, did you have an idea of wanting to go into drama, wanting to be an actor, or what were you like as a kid?
Well, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like, it just felt like, doesn't everybody want to do that? Like, you grow up watching TV. Like for me, it was that slow dawning of it actually being a job. Generally, when you're a kid and you watch TV, you don't really understand what it all is. It's just, you know, you're just seeing stuff, what's real, what isn't. And I remember loving The Fall Guy. Remember that old show?
Oh, love The Fall Guy.
It was amazing. I don't understand how that's not been redone yet. I mean, that's
for sure. Lee Majors,
one
awesome.
of the great movies. If nobody watching this or listening to this has heard of The Fall Guy, it's one of the great TV show premises of all time, which is stuntman by day, bounty hunter by night. I mean, that is the perfect television show, right?
Totally.
And so it was just Lee Majors badassing around, being a badass stuntman, doing a stunt at the beginning of the show, and then they'd get involved in some like bounty hunting adventure. At some point, he would use his stunt skills or his buddy's, you know, special effects or whatever movie magic thing to help catch the guy. There'd be a big action sequence, end of episode. It was like perfect TV. And so that was my first window that the, you know, movies just didn't just plop into existence, you know, like, you know, all by themselves. That there was all this stuff going on behind the scenes, and people had jobs and made them. There were directors and producers and actors and blah, blah. And then, yeah, beyond that, it was just, you know, drama class at school, doing the school plays, loving the school plays. And at the same time, I was just really super duper, like most kids are, into sports. You know, I was big into rugby and big into martial arts. And it was only when I was a teenager that I started to realize that, I'm going to have to have a career. At some point, I'm going to have a job in the future. And the only things I like to do are hit people, like in rugby or martial arts, or whatever I was doing. I like rough and tumble stuff, or I like acting. I wonder if there's a way to combine these things. And that's when, you know, at the same time, you know, this is like, we're talking like mid-90s when I'm really coming into my, you know, late teenage years, got to make some decisions. And like Jean-Claude Van Damme is one of the biggest movie stars in the world at that point, which is a very narrow time frame when he was a big star. But he was, and I was like, well, this is a viable option for me. I'll be an actor that can kick over his head, and I'll do martial arts, but I'll be able to do an American accent, unlike Dolph Lundgren or Jean-Claude. And so that'll give me an edge on them. Little did I know, like, how good at martial arts you really have to be for that to be your you're in to the industry.
Sure. Yeah.
So luckily, instead, I gravitated more to the acting side of things and just decided to become a bit more expert at that. And then occasionally when I get to do a stunt or something, I get an approving nod from a stunt director because I threw a punch right or I did a kick well. But these days, especially now that I'm an old man, like if there's a cool stunt to be done, I usually just let the stunt guy do it.
Happy to pass it off.
Right.
Sure.
That's their job.
Right. Did you ever? Were you ever trying to
pay me Tom Cruise money? But I might change my mind. But until then,
were you ever trying to do the splits between countertops? Were you ever trying to practice
that was my whole objective. Is like from 11 to 16, like pretty much every day I would do box splits to like try and just get it to that level. But to be fair, I've always been a bigger person. Like my adult, like what I am now is on the smaller side. Like when I was a rugby player, I was about 270, I weighed about 270 pounds. So trying to do box splits when you're 270 pounds is a recipe for the emergency room.
Well, I mean, because Van Damme is small. True. Van Damme is smaller than most people think, right?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, all the movie stars are, but especially some of those 80s action dudes like Stallone, and I met Stallone 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago when I did this Hercules thing that I did. And to be fair, he's massive. Like he's incredibly broad. Like he was almost like more broad than he is tall, like Stallone was. And also you got to assume at the red carpet thing I was at that he was probably wearing heels. And there still was a good head height over him. But that was actually more. It wasn't even that was disappointing because a lot of people had said that to me. If you ever meet these guys, you're gonna be surprised how much taller you are than them. But it also like filled me with kind of hope of that's one less thing that I don't have. Like height isn't a thing. Like just because you're only 6'2" and you're not 6'6" when you're going up for a role, it just doesn't matter. It's all about camera angles at the end of the day. If they like you, they'll just lower all the cameras and point them up to make you look taller. So
right, absolutely. Sure. So when you were, as you were getting into those teenage years, you were trained. Were you at a school specifically? Like and over there, when are you picking your trade? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it's funny because it totally depends. Like, there's nowhere near the same level of competitive ethos. Like Americans compete about literally everything. You turn everything into sports, which is great. It means you get like very high quality everything at the elite level. But back home, you really have to self-initiate a lot more, or have to have like overbearing parents that will like push you into things and make sure you go into after-school programs. It's just not the same. Like when I first came over here and I'd see the football fields that high schools have, or the idea that you can really have an athletic career through school that would end after university, and now you've got your degree and maybe you go into pro sports, or maybe you use your degree to go do something else. None of that exists back home. It's just not. There's nothing remotely equivalent to that. So and especially for me, like I say, there wasn't a lot of money teaching taekwondo or kickboxing or grappling to kids in Nottingham, which is where I lived at the time. And there was even less money in rugby, because rugby at that point wasn't even a professional sport. It was a gentleman's sport still considered back then. They didn't turn professional until the late 90s. And the only professional aspect of the sport was essentially a British version of American football called rugby league, which I didn't play. And as much as I was into it, I just didn't want to do it for a job. I was like, this is not going to be it for me. Plus, it's incredibly unlikely you're going to be successful as an athlete, and, injuries and everything else can happen. It just, no thanks. And then at the same time, I was like, well, what else can I do? Acting's incredibly unlikely. I mean, what are the chances of making a career as an actor? Especially, I didn't know anybody who had done it. Nobody in my family had ever been in entertainment. So I was thinking, well, maybe it's the military then. Maybe I'm going to be a fireman. I was just thinking about what I could do. And the more I'd look at all those jobs, I started to realize my association with most of those jobs, like anything in the military, and like fire service, something physical like that. All my real associations with them were through movies. And I was like, well, do I really want to be a fireman, or do I want to be a fireman in the movies? Do I really want to be a soldier, or do I want to be a soldier in the movies? And I realized the answer to all those things was yes, much better to be a soldier in the movies. And so that's when it became a bit more real and serious. And by that point, I'd done enough like plays and had been around real professional actors who and had helped them with preparing for scenes or whatever, and had enough nice things said back to me from them, encouraging me into the industry, that I thought, well, I'm young and selfish. and I don't have any responsibilities. Why don't I give it a go? And I just started picking up work, and I was like, all right, well, let's get serious about it. And that's eventually I moved over here. My wife moved over here, and we just made a go of it in America.
So
when,
did you?
when,
yeah.
yeah. When did you come out here?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. When Paul?
No,
when
no,
did
no.
you come-
So I finished my degree in the UK. I did a film degree.
Okay.
I was very fortunate. Back then in the late 90s, I was the last generation of British kids to get free university.
Oh, wow.
Like if you could qualify academically, and if a university would take you, you had a full ride. It was awesome. And then after that, they started charging tuition fees, and it's still not quite like how it is here, where you have to spend like $100,000 to get a degree, depending on the degree. But I was very lucky, and so fortunately, I picked a degree that I ended up using. Managed to pay back some of it in taxes, I guess, over the years with the film degree, and I loved it. But the whole time I was there, I was partially regretting not going to drama school. But I really wanted to learn how to make movies, and just wanted to be around people that were making films, and just that whole the direction into the industry as opposed to through theatre, which is how most British actors do it. Because I was just so desperate to go to the States and have my career over there. Just everything seemed more. I felt like what I was selling was more for the American market than it was for the British market. When I first came over here, I would almost exclusively audition for American roles and put on an American accent, because even though I am British and Scottish and all that, I don't necessarily look it in the sense of what most Americans, especially back then when I was 22 years old, 220 pounds, very muscular. Like Orlando Bloom was the equivalent young actor that everybody was trying to hire back then, and he played a blacksmith 3 times. It's a very physical role, and the guy weighs like 150 soaking wet. And I was like, well,
right.
maybe I've shown up here at the wrong time. They're not really looking for my type anymore. But yeah, the real shift into coming to the States came. I got a job. It was my 3rd acting job, but it was my first like real good job that I wasn't ashamed of. Like the first 2 jobs I got were like for terrible British sitcoms. I played a stripper in literally both shows. Like it was completely different storylines, but I basically played the exact same stripper role. And but then 2-3 months after that, I got a really good job. It was a remake of Spartacus that shot in Bulgaria. Not the most recent Spartacus with that was done on Stars. This was like 2003, 2004. It starred Goran Viznic from ER, and it was just a phenomenal production. It was amazing people to be around. Like, it was really old-fashioned. We went out there and like shot big battle sequences and real fake blood and real fake explosions and the whole thing. Very little green screen, and it was just like, okay, I can do this. Like, if I can get a job like this, I can. This can't be it. This is amazing. And then within 9 months of that, I got this job playing Hercules in an NBC miniseries that was a bit of a disaster, except for it was an amazing experience to make. And I got to work with like Timothy Dalton, Elizabeth Perkins, and Sean Astin, and all these amazing actors. It was shot in New Zealand. It was very, very, very cool, except for the actual film itself wasn't particularly good. But what are you going to do?
I watched the trailer, and having it been shot in New Zealand, I didn't see a lot of New Zealand in the trailer. I saw some sets that look like kind of like out there sets that could have been built anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to be fair, like, we did do a bunch of exterior stuff, and there is some gorgeous like photography that's just lifted right from Lord of the Rings. But the majority of my memories are being indoors and being in sound stages and wearing uncomfortable wigs. But it really just meant, okay, now it's time to go to the States. Like, I got Taft-Hartley into SAG, and everything was moving along. But the only problem was I was in love with a woman who lived in London and had a career in London. Carmen was at the time in Les Mis, was a bit of a name in the West End theatre world. And so it was all about trying to find the right excuse for us to both come over to the States. And that didn't happen until like a year and a half, maybe 2 years after the Hercules thing. This whole time I'm like flying back and forth, like auditioning in LA, auditioning in London, auditioning in New York, like just a lot of air miles. And but then finally Carmen got offered to do Wicked, to play the Green Witch in Wicked in the States, starting in Chicago. And so we was like, okay, this is it. We're never going to get a better opportunity. They're going to pay for us to move to America. Let's just do it. And so we did, and we've not looked back. And that was 2006. So
I was gonna say, you guys have been
that's awesome, man.
You guys have been together for quite some time.
Since we've been together since 2003.
That's amazing. Good for you guys.
Yeah,
that's
Thanks,
really cool.
man.
That's really cool.
And I mean, you guys are rarely in the same place, though, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, luckily, not recently. Like last 7 months, we're very close together.
That must be a new experience.
This is the test.
Funny. Yeah. To be fair, it's so on, what was it, March 13th, when everything stopped? Friday the 13th, I was supposed to fly. I was at Days working. I think I was shooting 2 episodes, and I was supposed to fly that night, red eye, to New York. Land at like 7 a.m., go get a couple of hours sleep at her apartment at Lincoln Center, and then go see the afternoon matinee of her the only new musical on Broadway this year, Flying Over Sunset. But on the 13th, just before I was due to fly out, Albert Alar called us all to set and said, okay, we're shutting down production for a few weeks. Don't worry, it's going to be fine. And Carmen called me, said, hey, they're shutting down the show. I'm flying to LA tomorrow morning. And I was like, so I was just relieved. Number one, because if you remember at the time, New York was like on fire with the virus. Like everybody was terrified. Yeah. So I was like, well, I'm glad I'm not going to have to go to New York. That's great. Yeah. And I was very relieved that Carmen was being sent back. And so to me, I was like, well, this worked out perfect. I'm going to get because Carmen and I hadn't seen that much of each other. She was away, rehearsing, getting this new show ready. I hadn't seen her for like maybe a month, maybe 3 weeks at that point. And so I just felt like selfishly like, well, I hope the pandemic works out and it doesn't take too long, but I'm just lucky that we're going to be together. And
we're going to have like a 3-week staycation. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, that was my mentality, because I was just, we have friends in Shanghai, and it really felt like we were getting like reports from the future whenever we talked to them. Sure. So I knew it was going to be more than, I didn't know like 7, 8, 9 months, a year and a half, like whatever it's going to be. But I certainly had the inkling that could be possible. And I knew it wasn't going to be like 3 months, because, like I say, my friends in Shanghai were still dealing with it 3 months in. So I was just like, well, let's just take this first month as like a honeymoon period and just enjoy the fact that we're together. And then all the downstream, fallout we'll deal with when we deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and because a friend of mine, Michelle, is also in that production of Flying Over Sunset.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. You were saying.
And and gosh, the outlook for them is a lot bleaker than it is for us on daytime.
We are so lucky.
We are so lucky to be
it's
working.
It's devastating because, theater is the lifeblood of acting. Like theater is the fount, it's the foundation for all of it. And if, there's a real threat of losing so much of it, not just, to the theaters themselves going bankrupt, but like you're going to lose a generation of performers that are forced out of I feel like a lot of people don't understand, it's one thing once you become a professional actor and you're competing with everybody and you really start to get a sense of just how much talent there is in the world. How much of your own success can be attributable to your choices and to your skill, but how much of it is luck and timing. And to see a whole chunk of the industry just laid low because of sheer bad luck and bad timing that is beyond anyone's control, it's really difficult. So, whenever anybody asks me about my show, about Days, I'm always just so grateful, because it's just, we are so lucky to be working for a show that on the one hand, we're working for shows that on the one hand take our safety seriously, but on the other hand are also just hustling so hard to bang out shows,
Totally. Totally.
Because under this circuit, I've got friends that are on primetime shows, and they're way more fragile than what we're doing, because their locations, they have to deal with other states or other countries sometimes.
Sure. So many more factors.
I just feel very grateful.
Yeah, we can really create a controlled environment in our bubble. Obviously we commute to work, so we're not in a bubble, but the workplace never changes, so it can be a controlled environment. But and thinking about Broadway's looking into mid next year, or whoever knows, but thinking about, I know that theater from where you're from in your country, like it's not just Broadway, like, and I think people in the States know that too. There's community theaters, there's regional theaters, there's, big theaters in secondary cities that aren't just New York. Like the amount of just the theater community that we could potentially lose, because there's no way for these small regional companies to weather this. Like it's a lot to grieve for, and hopefully they'll find a way back. But I think Broadway will be fine eventually, but some of the regional stuff, the smaller stuff, I worry for it.
Absolutely.
And it's sad. It's sad.
Well, the thing, Paul, you brought up a great point. Obviously all of our careers is timing, right? And the momentum that has just been stopped for so many people at the right time in their life. Yeah. That's what I feel bad for. It's like, wow, we were on, like, that was it. This was my chance. This was my shot. This was my springboard. And then everything gets shut down. But
everything just stops. Yeah. We had a little bit of that with, it's funny because people ask, like, oh, how's it going? I hear things are bad in California. How are the things over there? I hear it's bad in London. I hear it's bad here, bad there. But people would be calling me up around like April, May. And it sucked, but I also had just been nominated for an Emmy, and I just released a movie. Like I'd written and produced this very low budget, but fun little movie that I was proud of, and I just released it, and it was doing okay, by the very tame expectations that we had for it. But it was just those things where you didn't feel comfortable having good news because you just knew that So it's almost like all that stuff didn't happen. You know what I mean? Because you didn't get, like, we weren't able to have a screening. We weren't able to have a Emmys, show, real one, or the party, or all of that. And it just, without those, almost ritual elements of it, it's like, well, did that really happen? I mean, I mean, it does. It's on paper, but like the experience of it, which is ultimately all we have, didn't occur. So yeah, it's been so odd. Like, I just had a birthday, and I remember back in April when my wife had her birthday, and it was that was an early pandemic birthday, and everybody was still like very commiserating and, oh, I'm so sorry you're having your birthday under these circumstances, putting all this effort into it. Whereas like being a Halloween baby, we were so deep into it, people were just like, oh, happy birthday, whatever. Here's a cake.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's no sympathy anymore, because you're not special. You're right. Like everyone's had a birthday like this. Yeah. So did Hercules, did that help you in terms of, like, I know you said like the actual finished product didn't land maybe in the way that you were hoping when you booked the role, but did it certainly certainly propelled you into a career of sorts in LA, right?
Yeah, it did two things for me. I made a lot of friends on it, and I learned how to. I mean, I debated. My success as a leading man is debatable, but I certainly learned what the job was. Do you know what I mean? I've been very lucky to watch Goran play Spartacus and really see the value in somebody, like, taking the director directs the movie, the producer makes the movie happen, but a lead actor or actress can really set the work ethic and tone for the entire production. And if they're a dick, or if they're lazy, or if they're about anything but trying to make the best possible product, it can cause all these kinds of problems. And I'm so lucky with Goran because he's an absolute prince. He's such a great guy and a great actor, and more than anything, just knew what was required to be a leading man. And so I already had that, ideal going into Hercules. But at the same time, I was nowhere near as experienced. It was my fourth job. So I was just trying to tread the line of shooting for an ideal of behavior, but also just trying to manage my own absolute terror and the responsibility that had been pushed on me. And my mother had just died, and now I'm on the other side of the country. I'm on this other side of the world doing this. It was just a lot at the time, but it was also the perfect thing. So it was just getting lifted out of the world that I was in, and now you're a movie star. Now you're a miniseries star, not a movie star, a miniseries star. And here's some famous people that you grew up watching, and now you're higher on the call sheet than them. Good luck,
Right.
so all that side of it was amazing, and I learned a lot about myself and about the job, and that I really did want to do it, and this is what I should be doing. But then, and also, it did definitely get me on a bunch of lists that I hadn't been on before.
Right.
And so I got some amazing auditions for jobs that I did not book. And then that went on for like a year and a half. And then all of a sudden, that was my big break, but now I haven't worked for 18 months. And so that was the bit that was the biggest learning curve. It was like learning how to deal with your greatest success immediately followed by nothing. And it, again, back to this idea of like, timing and luck and everything else that goes into it. It was through that period that I really had to teach myself and learn how to, I think a lot of actors, a lot of professions, but especially in acting, it's hard to feel like you are an actor when you're not acting, when you don't have a job. And the longer that goes on, the more you just start to lose your grip on what you're actually even trying to do. Like auditioning is a job. It's a separate job almost to, the way you act in an audition is necessarily quite different from the way you act on set once you've actually booked a job. Like your whole perspective on the work that you're doing is different when you've been cast, and it just feels different. And so if all you're ever doing is auditioning, and especially if all you're doing is auditioning and not booking, it can really start to just eat away at all the things that are so important to acting, which is like breaking down your own self-consciousness, having the right kind of confidence, all those things. Like once you start to lose those, it can be very difficult to like buck yourself up enough to go back in again and again and again. Right. And so even though it was disappointing and it was depressing and all of that, now with the perspective of the career, this is all a long time ago now, like that period is way back in the rearview mirror. I realized that I did actually learn a ton of coping mechanisms. And not just that, like I started to realize how lucky I'd been in the first like couple of years of my career. And I guess you realize that ultimately there's no shortcuts. And yeah, I skipped out the bit where, you do regional theater or a touring show for a year and a half, or you do, a bunch of day player jobs, or you spend some time on a daytime drama or whatever it is to like weather you and give you all the experience that you need. Whereas I was doing it very lucky. I was so lucky to be doing it on a big, budget set. But sometimes it's good to be able to have those successes and failures under not quite such a spotlight and magnifying glass.
Yeah, sure.
But we all get the same breaks over the course of a career. And so now looking back, it's like, I don't feel lucky that I didn't have even more success early on. But now I understand just how lucky I had been. And that's the thing to really take from it, as opposed to, if only I'd gotten that, Avatar job, or if only I'd, said this in my James Bond audition and not that,
right.
Once you let go of all that stuff and just realize that you're not in control of any of it, buddy, just keep showing up,
Well, and especially now when, with what we're going through, to be working as an actor now is like beyond expectation for a lot of people. Yeah. Right. And also like even pre-pandemic, the way our business was working and the kind of, you talked about growing up over there where there is less competition or a smaller pool maybe. And now with everything being, being able to submit digitally from anywhere in the world, the pool of people that are competing for these roles is unfathomable, thousands, tens of thousands,
crazy.
So, that even, it kind of distills it even more into, gosh, a job is a job. And that's all, like that, it can be as basic as that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just the opportunity to get to go and act every day or almost every day and to tell like the story. I mean, I guess the biggest shift that's happened with me that I really didn't expect, that's come out of working in daytime, is that now when I do a more conventionally shot thing, like either a primetime guest star or an independent movie or whatever I can fit in, with the day's schedule, depending on my workload, it's just how slow it all moves.
Oh, dude, it's a freaking screeching halt.
I know. Like, what are we doing? Come on.
I know.
And I never thought I'd be that guy, because I used to always want as much time to prepare as possible. But now, through doing the shows, I've gotten so much faster. You just start to, make everything a bit more efficient about the way you do things. And so, yeah, I mean, I did an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. last year or the year before, and I literally was mad about it. I was sitting in the chair, just seething, like just mad that I didn't have it. Like, I've just got to wait and just be here. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, what time is this? And I'm going to end up getting overtime and a meal penalty. And then it's like, what am I complaining about? It's so strange.
Well, it's so Paul, because being in daytime for 20 plus years, you're trained like, hey, I'm going up. I got these maybe emotional scenes. I know it's going to be about 11 a.m. I got to start getting ready. You go up, you do your work. You're like, okay, I left it all out there. I go home. And then I went to do a movie. Like, I had the whole script memorized before I got off the plane, like to start. And then I sat in my trailer for 2 weeks without anyone knocking on the door. And I'm like, this is different.
Like, why?
and it's a big
held hostage for money.
It's a big budget movie. And then like actors, well-known actors are taking 3, 4, 5 takes to get their lines right. And I'm like, what's happening here?
What you been doing with all this time?
What are you doing? Like, so that was one of the drivers for me to go back to General Hospital was like, I like doing 1, 2, 3 takes max. I like knowing what I'm going to do. And it's, that process, my hat's off to, film actors who can sustain all that stuff for so long. And I know that's what they're used to. I get it. Because I
totally see what you're saying.
If you throw them into our world, they're effed.
Right.
So it's a whole new ball game. But
absolutely.
I've often found that too much. I mean, obviously, if you're doing either maybe a historical figure or something where you need to nail either whatever requires a lot of preparation, that's something. But I feel like too much time to think about your choices can be a detriment. Like you're not as present because you're so wrapped up in your preparation. Like I feel like just the right amount of preparation with the right amount of energy is all I need. Like, and that's the great thing about daytime is that there's energy in it because it's like, all right, let's go.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's all the spontaneity as well.
Yeah.
Especially at days. Because you guys don't get any time. So first of all,
it's basically live. We do a live show at this
point. Congrats on an Emmy nomination on the way you guys work. So that's number one.
I do appreciate that. That's lovely.
But so you went to Days as just kind of recurring, or was it contracted?
Well, it was it was funny. It was actually kind of a funny story. So not too long after I think Hercules hadn't quite aired yet, because it's an NBC show, or it was an NBC miniseries. And before it aired, I was brought in to meet like all the casting bigwigs at NBC and all of that. And then as part of that day of just meeting a bunch of people, I met the folks at Days. I met Marnie and Greg,
yes.
I think, Greg Mann.
Yes. Wait, hey, hold on. Sorry, Paul. Sorry, Paul, to interrupt. What year was the Hercules thing?
I think it aired in 2005. So this would have been really early. This would have been about, I guess it would have been pre-pilot season 2005.
Okay.
So let's say February, around there.
Okay, sure.
And so I'd already had a couple of visits to LA, and that was how I'd gotten the Hercules job in the first place, through those contacts. But this is my first all right, now I'm moving over. I'm gonna get a green card. I'm in SAG. Here we go. American actor. Finally, in my head. That's what was going to happen. And I remember meeting Marnie and Greg and having a really nice meeting with them, and just being a bit of a snoot, because I'd just done this mini-series, Joey. I thought, oh, you should be so lucky that I'll do your little soap opera, but I'll take the meeting. You know what I mean? Like very just a cocky idiot. And then, to be fair to them, every 6 months they would either offer me an audition or just offer a role. Like they would either want to audition me for a contract role, or just offer me a few episodes of a character. And I didn't always turn it down just out of being a snoot, but most of the time I did. Like a lot of it was I either wasn't in town and it wasn't in my head then worth it for me to come over for that. I would be in the UK or I'd be in New York. But years later, maybe 2007, 2008, whenever they did that show, I'd flown over to test for Spartacus. Again, like a different Spartacus, the one for Stars with Andy Whitfield and all of them. And I got a bunch of callbacks for different roles on it. And just basically I got very close to 3 different roles and then didn't get hired. So I was very disappointed and about to fly to New York to meet up with Carmen with my tail between my legs after yet another failed pilot season. When literally the day before I was due to fly out, my agent called up and said, "Hey, can you change your flight? Because I know you don't want to do a soap opera right now, but Days of Our Lives want to offer you 10 grand to fill in for James Scott. He's sick. Like there's something, he's got some medical issue, and he might not be able to show up at work. So they want you to basically just be on standby, learning his lines. And if for any reason he can't work, you jump in." And I was like, "Wait, for real? There'll just be a little thing on the screen saying today EJ is played by Paul Telfer." And they're like, "Yeah, that's how they do it." I was like, "So basically, you're just looking for any tall British dude wandering around LA that might not have anything to do?" They're like, "Yes." And I was like, "All right." So I changed my flight, and then
would you get paid no matter what?
Yeah, you get paid no matter what.
I was just like, yeah, like this is like a dream deal.
Yeah.
But then as soon as I said yes, I was like, "Oh no, like I've got to learn all these lines." But I didn't even know back then. I didn't know. I had no idea. Then the scripts turn up. I was like, oh, it's like a stack of scripts. And like that, this is just to get you through to Wednesday. And it was like 6 scripts. I was like, what do I do? And I'd literally just be and I think I gave up on like the Tuesday. I just gave up trying to learn. I was just like, if they call me in, we'll just worry me. Like it was the ultimate like actor's anxiety dream. But for real, just like every night going to sleep, just like, what if they call tomorrow? I don't know the lines. Like, it was so awful. And then I got to Friday, they never called me in, and I still got paid. And I was like, oh, these days
the best job ever.
Incredible. So I went in to meet them again. And Marty's like, "So, now that you've had a near miss with us, would you be more interested in maybe doing a job?" And I was still like, "No, I'm good. I'll take the money and run." And I was like,
That's
and then
amazing.
it was literally ages later now, like 2014, I want to say. Carmen, we're living in LA now. We're based here, and she'd been offered a job, this amazing musical that Steve Martin was doing, and it was starting in San Diego at the Old Globe before moving to New York. And I was like, well, this would be nice to like actually have us both be working in California, not be doing the crazy commute, all of that. And then Marnie came through with an audition for Days of Our Lives, just for like, I think it was like 4, 5, 6 episodes, something like that, for a henchman character for Victor. And, part of it had been that the roles that I'd been offered before were always like doctors or lawyers or kind of just romantic leads. And that's all great. I mean, and now I understand the value of those jobs. But at the time, I was just, like I said, I was just a lot more selfish back then. And I didn't necessarily care so much about making any money. I had a little bit of money in my pocket. And I just didn't want to do things I didn't want to do. And but I was like, oh, I kind of want to do this. This might be fun. And being a tough guy on a soap opera might be a fun way for me to work out if I want to do it at all. And I ended up loving it. Like I went in and so I'm this henchman in a leather jacket, and I'm being all like moody British behind the amazing John Aniston. And my very first scene, I thought we were still rehearsing when they moved on. I was like, wait, that's going to be on TV. And nobody even replied. They just kept marching on, and I was like, oh, here we go. Okay. But once I got over that, just the sheer pace of it, and just, the requirement of the actor to just let it go, say it, let it go, don't microanalyze everything like you usually do with an audition or a job or whatever, like just say it and move on. And once I did that and felt I could do it, I actually really started to enjoy it. And I was really hoping they would just keep me on as this henchman and just give me like, I don't know, 30 episodes a year, so I could get my health insurance and go off and do other jobs and write my little movies like this. That'll be perfect. And instead they turned around and said, like, we'll give you a year's contract to play this new character. And I was like, okay. And but it ended up being Xander. And I don't think there's any other character I could have played on a daytime show. Looking back now, that would have worked for me the way Xander has. Like, it allows me to do all the things that I can do, and it's allowed me to work on things that I didn't used to be able to do. You know what I mean? Do it all in front of an audience and get well, not live feedback, but like 7 months hence feedback on what I'm doing.
And you came in as it's a legacy family, Kiriakis family.
Right.
Obviously, it's been there for a long time, so that's all. That didn't hurt.
Right, that helps for sure.
Yeah, that helps.
Well,
But it was funny though, because, sorry, go ahead.
Well, just one thing you said about working on the stuff that you don't necessarily felt like you already had, and you like that's not necessarily an actor's go-to, right? Like
Right.
sometimes someone would be like, "Oh, I can get away and just do this, which I know I'm good at," and like not challenge themselves in that way.
Right.
So that's
But
a
it goes
really
back
cool
to
way
what
of
I was saying. Yeah, like that whole thing of weathering and experience. And if you get lucky and you get success early on, you don't necessarily know what you don't know. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And whereas if you're doing hundreds of episodes a year, sooner or later they're going to throw some stuff at you that you don't
Yes,
either
sir.
you don't know how to do, or you're not comfortable doing, or you
Yeah.
just don't want to do. I just don't want to do this. Like it's silly,
Right.
or whatever it is, and
Yeah.
you just find a way to get it done. And then on the other side of it, then you get the growth. You know? So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So talking about the movie that you just did, yeah, obviously you went to film school, so has creating your own, telling your own stories, or creating through other people's stories, whatever, that's always been in you? Like
That was always the goal originally. I thought I was an ugly duckling. I never thought I was attractive enough to be an actor, which is so dumb now looking back. Like, because most of my favorite actors are not pretty people. But but like growing up, I just thought it was such a huge part of. Well, it's just the anxiety and the neuroses you have as a youth. But I just didn't think that was going to be the avenue for me, and I already had been writing a little bit and really gravitated towards English literature at school. Did well at that, and just felt I had some facility for writing. But as soon as I knew what directing was, like movie directing specifically, I thought, I really want to do that one day. Like just the idea of like marshalling all the forces of the film set, the actors, the production designers, just all of it, to be able to have all of that and try and make something has always been incredibly appealing. It's just incredibly expensive. Like if you're going to be a director, you need to find you either need to be a producer or find a producer that can raise money for you. And movie making, even now, is a with all the advances that have been made in making things cheaper and more like you can do it all at home, it's still an expensive proposition to make a feature-length film. And so when all of a sudden around like 2021 people started accusing me of being handsome, I was like, you know what, I might give acting a little shot then, and give that a go for a minute. And I guess the problem for a long time there was that I just got a bit passive and would wait for the phone to ring with an audition or whatever, instead of like working hard on my own stuff as well. And that really kind of came to a head the last few years when I realized that's why, I wasn't, even though I was working and even though I was enjoying the work I was doing, that I wasn't necessarily like satisfied or happy with myself, not the work, but with myself. And I started to realize because I wasn't really contributing anything of my own. And so I've been working off and on with my buddy Jared, a Scottish director that lives in LA. We've been trying to get something financed for ages around the 1.5 million to 3 million level. And it just would always get just so close, and then it would be snatched away from some bad luck or all the things that can happen when you're trying to raise millions of dollars. And we eventually just got so sick of it, and we're like, well, what can we just make? What could we do? What could we shoot if we had no budget? Like what? And we just started taking like stock of any interesting items that we own. Who do we know that has a cool vehicle? Who do we know that has a location? Like we arranged all those things and then tried to build a story to those elements instead of coming up with a story and then running around trying to buy things. And so that's how we were able to do it so cheaply. And honestly, it's that making that film, getting it finished, selling it to Lionsgate, all of that. As much as I still get so much out of acting, I'd be devastated to not be able to do it. But it was the best feeling I've had since that first real good Spartacus job.
Awesome.
Green Rush just really felt like, oh, this is the stuff,
Awesome.
Outside, running around, terrorizing people. It's great.
So the movie's called Green Rush.
Green Rush, yeah. It's based on a true story that happened to a friend of ours. He's a weed farmer, a medicinal.
Oh, that's right.
Dispensary. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Gets betrayed by his employees, and they invite a psychopath essentially onto the farm to help them rob the farm owner. Meanwhile, he's just discovered that his girlfriend is pregnant, and so everything just turns into a bloody massacre. But it's a lot of fun.
Where can people find that?
So Amazon, iTunes, we're still, it's only really in the States at the moment. We just finished getting the rights sold to the Far East. No one cares about that, but it's in America. It's on Amazon and iTunes, and I think you can buy it on YouTube as well. But we're waiting to see, once it gets out of the window, which streaming platform it's going to go on to. But
Awesome,
I'll tell
man.
everybody about that when it happens.
That's great, dude.
Awesome, man.
Congratulations.
Well, congratulations. That's incredible.
Thanks, man. It was a lot of fun.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So I know it's a lot of work. So well
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
So-
Well, it's been so great to get to know you and visit.
And
for a
you,
bit.
lads.
Yeah,
Thank
man.
you so much for having me on. You're
Yeah,
fantastic.
dude, it's so awesome. Thanks so much. I know it's been a while and it took a while, but thank you. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Well, I hope we get to meet in real life at some point.
Right?
That'd be fun.
Sooner than
Right.
later.
I know,
hope.
right? Awesome.
Yeah.